Hello, everyone. I hope that you can hear me and you can see me as well. Hi, everyone. Really happy to meet you here, and I hope that we'll have an interesting presentation today, but also a discussion. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Maya, and I'm one of the co-founders of FindMeCure, the platform that changes the way people access treatments in research. Um, our uh, our foundation, FindMeCure, is a part of the International Alliance of Patient Organizations, and this is our second time joining the Patient Solidarity Day 2017. We really like the motto. Knowledge is a power. So that's why we decided to join this day as providing you with more knowledge about an era that we think is very important for all of us, especially for the ones having a certain condition. So first of all, before moving forward with the whole presentation, I would like to ask you if you have any questions. Please add them to the chat box that you can see below on your screen. I wouldn't be able to answer the questions right away, but I will make a lot of time in the end of the presentation to go through all of the questions that you ask. And in the end of the day, this is just the first presentation, the first webinar, and I hope that with your help, we can create a series of other webinars to answer some of the really hot topics around treatments in research, clinical research, what are the challenges, risks, benefits, etc. So the presentation that you will hear today will be more generic one, though I'll try to mention like some really important details, but I'd love to find out what's more important for you, and then really create follow-up webinars to answer all of your questions. It's important because the reason having this webinar, the reason why FindMeCure exists, is actually because we want to help each other. So first of all, I will remove my camera because the quality of the sound will be much better. And then you see me after the presentation again. And I would really like you for you to focus on the presentation itself. Where are all the new treatments for my conditions? This was exactly the question that I asked myself 5 years ago. My sister was diagnosed with a very severe eating disorder, and it was a nightmare for me and my whole family. We tried everything out there, all the traditional treatments, all the not traditional treatments, but nothing really worked out on her. And I was really surprised because nowadays we have such exciting technologies, but when it comes to innovations in medicine, I was wondering where are all these new treatments, where is the innovation in the medicine in general? And I was lucky though, because my professional path has brought to a pretty close medical field. 10 years ago, I started educating professionals worldwide about clinical research regulations. I created like a network of more than 100 experts around the world. We were providing training once again to organizations like the United Nations, Ministries of Health, all the private pharma companies. And I knew that every new treatment, if there is a new treatment, it has to be first proven in a clinical trial. Many years right after the World War II, all countries decided to unite themselves in a mutual agreement called the Declaration of Helsinki, and the so-called ICH GCP regulations. This stands for International Conference of Harmonization Good Clinical Practice. These are all the standards that guarantee, that ensure the safety of people when they enter like clinical trials. So this Declaration of Helsinki really defines a more human approach to testing of new drugs and therapies and ensures people's safety and the quality of the new medicinal products. I can speak a lot about history, but I think the most important thing is looking at the practical side as being a patient. And the first question you ask as being the patient is, what is actually a clinical trial? A clinical trial is the official and the only official and safe way for a new treatment to be tested and proven. That the new treatment is more efficient than everything existing right now. In some cases, you compare existing treatments to the new ones, and in some cases, you create new treatments, but this is the only way. A clinical trial is the part when researchers introduce the new treatment to human patients, but before that, there were years of research in the laboratory on animals, and nowadays even more on artificial human organs, replicating our organism in one way or another. This means that by the time the clinical trial starts, the researchers have pretty good understanding of how the new compound or medical device is working, and they're pretty comfortable to try and apply it with patients in order to prove that this is working and it's better than the already approved treatments. So this is in general clinical trial. And I would like to show you here in 2 slides how clinical trial changed our lives, the lives of millions of people. Though there were certainly failures in the past, in the end, clinical trials brought to us drugs for cystic fibrosis, skin cancer, diabetes, and many, many more. Something that's really amazing is the fact that in the past few years, through testing, we were able to change the HIV into a chronic disease, and very much looking to happen the same with cancer, and possible to find the cure one day. So this is once again, is a way to introduce innovation in an official format so that people can feel safe, but also take an advantage from innovations in medicine. Of course, it looks very straightforward, but the bad news is that in order for a clinical trial to be compliant and safe, it takes a lot of time for a new drug or medical device to be approved. And like my mom says, the good things in life take a lot of time. So on average, a clinical trial takes around 12 years. Of course, each one is different. Each one of the clinical trial is different. It might take more or less. For example, clinical trials on drugs take a lot more compared to clinical trials on medical devices. Something that I didn't mention when speaking about the clinical trial and what this is that clinical trials, in order for something, a drug or a medical device or whatever, to have a medical label, to have a medical application, it has to be proven in a clinical trial. So even if you're using your Fitbit for prevention of diabetes, in order to have this label, you have to run this in a clinical trial and prove it first. So I said that each one of the clinical trial is really different. This doesn't mean that you as a patient will have to be a part of the clinical trial through all of these years, like these 12 years. Before you join a clinical trial, you are usually introduced to the purpose and the stage of the trial in a protocol, and you have to sign an informed consent before joining. This protocol and this informed consent, they all have all the information about the study, and also the details, how much time and how often do you have to be with the researcher, for example, what you should expect and what are the pluses and minuses. If you are further interested in this, I will create a next session on how to read and understand these documents. But generally speaking, to give you an example, each clinical trial has requirements for how many times you have to spend with your researcher and do examinations. Let's say if you have rheumatoid arthritis, then the clinical trial might require from you to visit the researcher and do some tests with the doctor, let's say once a week or twice a week, or sometimes once a month. And it really depends on the specific protocol of the clinical trial. This is something that you understand when you review the documents together with the doctor the researcher, basically. Next, I will speak about every single stage separately, as this is crucial to understand if you are when you are the patient. It gives you a lot of information about the new treatment, the risks and the benefits of the study. And as you can see, the clinical trial is divided in four main phases. These are stages that comes with different levels of risks and benefits, but also different types of understanding of the new treatment. And logically, I'll start with the first phase of the clinical trial. If you can't hear me, or if there's something that you want me to review a little bit more in details, please use the chat box once again and let me know if I need to go back and find out more and review something more specific. The four phases are really important, once again, because they define a lot the risks and the benefits that you would expect from a clinical trial. And this is exactly the reason I will try to review the most important things in each and every stage, in every phase. The first phase, for example, is the first after testing in the laboratory or on animals. Before starting the first phase, this process is called preclinical testing. After you start the first phase, this is already a clinical phase, a clinical trial. By regulations, this phase requires for not that many people to be involved as participants of the study. As you can see, these are volunteers between 20 and maximum 100 people who join the study. Its main focus is on providing the safety and toxicity of the new compound or device. The scenario is usually the following. A research hospital or a university department starts a clinical trial and invites usually healthy volunteers. These volunteers are being paid for their participation, so that means that they have a different motivation to start being a part of this study. Not all new treatments start with phase 1, because sometimes clinical trials being done for already approved drugs or devices, which are already known, are already safe. At the same time, this drug or device is being tested for efficiency on another condition. Meaning, let's say if a drug that is approved for diabetes have indications to help with obesity, for example, and you want to have this medical label to this drug, for example, you have to run a separate clinical trial for this, but it might be not necessary to start from phase 1 because you've already proven in other clinical trials, other previous clinical trials, that this drug is already safe, so that you can start with phase 2, for example. In this case, these clinical trials start at second phase, as I said directly. You have to know that every step of the clinical trial is closely monitored by thousands of ethics committees worldwide and local and international regulatory bodies like the FDA or the European Medical Agency. And only when they approve certain results, the sponsor of the clinical trial, the company or the governmental body that funds this clinical trial can continue with the next phase. If I have to really summarize the phase 1, this is really the phase when you have the most risks, because this is the phase where there are more unknowns. But at the same time, there are patients that are in this position where they really have no other choice. And at the same time, as I said, all these people will be really closely monitored, so their safety is more or less ensured. Second phase, for example, requires a lot more patients to join, like several hundred patients. It takes much longer, of course, for this phase to be completed, compared to the phase 1 where the phase is completed for a couple of months. Here you have between 3 and 5 years. Its focus is on providing the efficacy of the new treatment. So you already know that this treatment is safe. You want to also ensure that there is efficacy of this drug or device. This is often the time when a placebo is being introduced so that researchers can make sure that the new compound has real effects and it's not just positive expectations by the patients. And when I say patients, usually people who join this phase have a certain condition and are looking for some kind of a cure, an alternative of their existing or not existing treatments. Most likely, they're not paid additionally, like the healthy volunteers. But in most cases, there is some sort of compensation for their time they spent or the traveling expenses they have. Like the placebo topic is something that is like really broad topic, and I would love to discuss this further. It has its pluses and minuses, but generally speaking, on a scientific level, it's something that really helps the humanity to really realize what's efficient and what's not. My favorite phase is the third one, and like I don't want to be biased when providing you this information, but I'll give you my point of view, and of course, I'd love to hear your point of view. So why it's my favorite phase? The third phase is when we know so much more about the new treatment. It has shown quite promising results with the first phase and the second phase, and it has to be proved, the effectiveness of the new treatment has to be proved just before being approved to enter the market and reach all of us, all of the patients out there. In this phase, the clinical trial is conducted in hundreds of hospitals worldwide, and thousands of patients have to be involved as participants. Sometimes these clinical trials, phase 3, require tens of thousands of patients in order for them to be completed and be approved by the regulatory bodies to enter the market. And as you see, this phase is even longer, on average 5 years. Also, this is the time when they have a lot more information on adverse events, or like translated in the normal language, the way I call it, like side effects. And then, of course, the fourth phase, it's the fourth phase. This is also called the post-marketing phase. The new treatment is on the market already, but it's still being monitored for their side effects. So you can understand that after the third phase, more or less this treatment is already in the pharmacies, or at least many doctors already know about it, and they're allowed to provide it to their patients. They're still closely monitoring what are the reactions and what is the effectiveness of the treatment compared to other treatments, but it's something approved. So that's probably one of the reasons I think that the third phase has a lot of benefits, because this is the time when you can really access innovative treatments before they come into the market. And also, there is already some pretty good experience with the current treatment. And also another thing is that usually in the third phase, they just do a comparison between already approved treatments and the new treatment, whether the new treatment is more efficient than the current existing one. Because their perspective is there is no reason for them to manufacture a treatment that has the same results as something existing. So when they approve a certain drug, it has to be something better. So everything looks pretty straightforward so far. Why aren't there more people taking part in clinical trials? That's the question after that. Because it's actually not so straightforward, and there are certainly a lot of challenges for people to join clinical trials. And I've covered just some of them here. And I'm sure that if we start speaking about different case scenarios, we can speak a lot about them. Before moving into the challenges, just to give you some kind of understanding about FindMeCure. So FindMeCure is a platform where you can apply for a clinical trial as being a patient. That means that, so within the platform, there are thousands of people every single month that come to us and ask for our support to help them enter a certain clinical trial, which means that these are thousands of different case scenarios that we have to handle. And I can speak a lot about these examples and the challenges of these people to be a part of these clinical trials. But I would like to just outline the top 5 and provide you with more information, because these are the main reasons why it's so difficult for a normal patient to be a part of a clinical trial. First of all, the most common way people find out about clinical trials is through their doctors. So you have a specialist, you have a doctor, you visit them and you try different treatments, and one day your doctor says, you know what, I'm now working on a clinical trial, would you like to be a part of it? Or you know what, I know about this clinical trial that my like a colleague is working on, would you like me to introduce you to this colleague of mine? And then you can find out more information and take part of this clinical trial. This means that that this doctor will be able to help only some people, and not all the information that he will provide on the alternatives will be just, so the information that he will provide on the alternatives will be just a fraction of what's out there as an alternative. Just for your information, there are currently 57,000 clinical trials that are looking for participants. My point is that out there are publicly available clinical trial registries where you can see all of the currently 57,000 clinical trials that are now looking for participants, actively recruiting new patients to join these clinical trials, which is great. And these registers, the main issue with these registers is, okay, so you find out something on the web, but how do you trust this information? And most of all, if you have access to these publicly available clinical trial registers that are official ones, how do you understand the information there? So if you go there, they have a great search option. You can have access to like probably 95% of all clinical trials happening worldwide now. The problem with these websites is that the information that you see there, these are actually the documents that the facilitators of the clinical trials are submitting to the regulatory authorities. This is not information that is dedicated for the patients. They have created this register just to say, well, here are all the things out there. This is publicly available. I hope like this is something that should help you, but in the end, what you see are documents that are really dedicated for clinical trial staff to be able to read, and not a normal person. And there are platforms like FindMeCure that are tackling this problem by trying to really simplify this information so that you can have a better idea of what are the most important pieces of information that you have to focus on, and really make an informed decision whether you want to proceed or not. So you can have a look on clinicaltrials.gov once you have the chance, and then you can review FindMeCure.com and see the difference. And I would love to hear your comments because this is the way we improve the platform every single day. And the third issue is, okay, you found the information, you somehow understood the information. Who do you need to contact? Who do I need to contact so that I can find out more about this study and really be able to proceed? Most contacts on the web are contacts to switchboard numbers. And these board numbers, the people there usually ask you to contact your doctor, and the doctor will provide you with more information. But here's the thing. If you haven't heard of this clinical trial by your doctor, most likely your doctor doesn't know about this clinical trial as well. So you need some kind of information to provide to your doctor in order for him or she to advise you on that. And then if you are lucky and have the contact details of the coordinator of the study, then yes, this is great. But usually when you contact someone and you're not from this hospital, for example, or you're not a patient to this particular doctor, then you can wait for a response forever, because you know that doctors are really busy. On average, they have worldwide, I speak about, on average, they have like 10 minutes maximum per patient. And that's why it's very hard communication with them. Some of the best case scenarios that we had is that you wait for like a month to get a response. By that time, it might happen many things. And if you're in the position for looking for a clinical trial, that means that you're really looking for an alternative and you don't have that much time, or you really feel uncomfortable or in pain or etc. Of course, the eligibility, every single clinical trial comes with the protocol that I mentioned. And this protocol defines what are the criteria for a patient to be able to join or not join, and why not joining this clinical trial. The inclusion and exclusion criteria. Usually these criteria are like a list of like a lot of requirements. Sometimes it's really hard to understand if you're not a medical person. And if you're not eligible to these requirements, you cannot join the study. Many people are really angry about it, and they say, well, they say I'm not eligible, I can't join this study. But the reality is that these eligibility criteria are there also for your own safety. They define who the people can really join because they've researched the compound, the treatment, and they know that at a certain stage, these people will mostly benefit from this treatment and others not that much. Yes, once this is already on the market, then many other people will benefit from the treatment. But during the clinical trial, this is the case. And if you're not eligible for one study, there are hundreds of others. Sometimes, yes, sometimes not that many, but still there are other alternatives. And if you go to a platform like FindMeCure, you can really see a list of all clinical trials and try to find the one that you are eligible for. And I can speak a lot about placebo and about side effects. The most important thing about placebo is that this is not always a sugar pill. In many cases, when people have life-threatening conditions, they're provided with the best available on the market treatment as a placebo. So let's say you have a certain form of cancer. By regulation, the clinicians, they're not allowed to give you a sugar pill, and they will provide you, instead of a placebo, with the best available treatment on the market and compare it to the new treatment. So that means that you will be not left like that without treatment. You will still have some sort of care and treatment. And about side effects, I'll just show you an infographic. We can speak a lot about side effects. This is something that it's monitored. In reality, even a normal aspirin has side effects and risks and benefits. So just to give you sort of an idea, for the past 20-30 years of studies on cancer, for example, there is only 1% of serious side effects. So this shows you really that yes, there are side effects, but the serious side effects are just 1% of like all the cancer clinical trials, which are some of the most complicated ones. Like down the road, I will explain you that sometimes the side effects that you have on the treatments that are already approved might be even more dangerous, because when you're a part of a clinical trial, you're really closely monitored. Sometimes you have an application, it might be like on your mobile device or some kind of other tracker or another way for the clinical trial staff to monitor your health. And then once you have certain concerns, you can call the staff 24 hours and let them know, or really be able to like track your condition and like change your dosage, or really stop being a part of this clinical trial. And yeah, this is something that I want to cover exactly in the next slide. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time to cover all the important topics like further risks and benefits. But I think it's very important for all of us to know that, first of all, if you decide to be a part of a clinical trial, you can quit at any time without even giving any like reason for that. You can wake up today and say, well, I no longer want to be a part of this. I think that I can be better on my own, etc. And just go and say, I don't want to be a part of this clinical trial, and that's it. Of course, probably that's not the best thing for you to do, because by being a part of like having certain treatment, you might have like certain positive effects, and you don't want to. And sometimes these positive effects come with the time. So if you let's say stop having this new drug or new drug, for example, you might lose the positive effects. But in the end, it's your personal decision, and there are no legal ways for someone to make you be a part of this clinical trial. You signed off the informed consent today, and tomorrow you can say, well, actually, yeah, I think that's not something that I want to proceed with. Yes, of course, the reimbursement part, as I said, if you are a healthy volunteer, you usually get a certain fee for, like, not fee, I'm sorry, but like you get paid for being a part of this clinical trial. When it comes to the other volunteers from phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, you're already a patient, and it's because of ethical principles, it's not allowed for you to be paid, but there is certain compensation on your traveling expenses, sometimes accommodation, sometimes compensating you on like on time that you spent in the hospital. And of course, you can get free or even discounted access to the treatment even after the study has been completed. This is called expanded access program. After the clinical trial is being completed, let's say you've participated in a phase 3 clinical trial, and after the 5 years, you still want to get access to this treatment, then in many cases you're allowed to do that until the treatment is on the market, and sometimes actually forever. I'll give you an example. Unfortunately, it's not the very happy example for me, but I wanted to. So within FindMeCure, we had a family applying for a clinical trial for their 2-year-old daughter that has a spinal muscular atrophy, very very serious condition, and they wanted to be a part of the first clinical trial working on a actual treatment and a cure for such a condition. And the thing is that this clinical trial has been completed in the States a little bit earlier than the clinical trials in Europe. So they already knew that this is already approved in the States, and it showed like great results. It's the first treatment that really stops this condition of like being of the really life-threatening ending that it has. And then for the people who are a part of the phase 3 clinical trial, this treatment was provided for free even after the clinical trial was completed. And this treatment now costs like around $100,000 sometimes a year, which is like really a lot because it's like an injection, and each injection costs around $20,000. And many of the families cannot afford this. But if you were a part of this clinical trial, then you will get this treatment for free. And this particular family, they learned about this clinical trial very late, but we are still working on helping them getting access to the treatments. And actually, we think that they will be able to really participate in Austria, which is really great. But this is just a case for you to see how this might be relevant for some cases, for some patients. And the benefits of clinical trials, of course, the risks, there are certain risks that we already like discussed, like the placebo, the unknown side effects, for example. But there are also many benefits coming with the clinical trial. Like, for example, being a part of the clinical trial means that you get access to treatment for free, not only after the clinical trial, but also through the clinical trial. And usually it's not already on the market, so you have access to something that's new, innovative, and might be a lot better than everything out there. In some cases, you don't have you have a treatment that no longer works on your condition, and this is the way you can get something new. Of course, you have better healthcare service, basically monitoring all the time, close monitoring, access to innovative treatments this is something that I mentioned. And of course, many of the people are joining these clinical trials because they are contributing to the science and helping for the scientists to know better the disease and really find a cure. So at that point, I really want to see what kind of questions you have, and what are the areas that you still want me to cover a little bit more. So if you are just give me a second. I want to see what kind of questions you have, and if there is something that I need to stress on, I'd love to do that. Just trying to open the chat box. Yes, here it is. So here is Christine Williams, and she says, hello, I'd be interested in learning more about rare disorders and how to find treatment. So Christine, thank you so much for this question. The rare disorders, the challenge with the rare diseases is the following, that there are many clinical trials for diseases that are very common, that millions of people are having. But when it comes to rare diseases, not many companies are focusing on them. And when I say companies, I say companies because 90% of clinical trials are funded by private organizations, and only 10% of them, of clinical trials, are funded by governmental bodies. So this is one of the challenges. However, things changed, and now many companies are moving their focus on rare diseases as well, because they're looking into precision medicine, personalized medicine, and like other markets as well. And the rare disease market is exactly this one for them. So one thing that you could do, Christine, is really look at the sponsors, the companies that have this focus on rare diseases. And if you don't know them, I'll be more than happy to provide them with a couple of names for that. But you can also easily find out about that, about these sponsors, by just browsing on our platform, for example. If you go to FindMeCure.com, unfortunately, for some reason, I can't share my screen. If Victoria from IAPO is able to do that, what I can ask her to do is really to go to FindMeCure.com and just type in the burning mouth syndrome. Actually, Christine said here, for example, burning mouth syndrome, I checked the clinical trial page and there were 2, but a good few years ago. I'll keep checking back. Yes, that's a very good example, Christine. First of all, by like browsing um, on our platform, you will be able to see what are the currently recruiting clinical trials. But if you unclick the checkbox for open clinical trials, you will see all the completed ones. The completed ones are the ones that have shown some kind of results. And these results on our platform and can give you an idea whether there was some kind of a new drug produced out of this clinical trial or some kind of results, whether there will be probably a next phase. And what we're trying to do with our colleagues, there is option for accounts. So if you create an account on our platform, and if you want to learn more about a particular condition, let's say new clinical trials coming, starting looking for volunteers, or being completed, or just like an overview of what's happening in this area, then we can send you notifications about that. And I see that Christine Williams was able actually to see the clinical trials that she was interested in. And I'll go on with other questions. Anka Pop. Hi, Maya. Which is the specific difference between FindMeCure platform and the official platform of clinicaltrials.gov in finding an appropriate clinical trial? Thank you. Anka, we are using a similar information on clinical trials. We also try to add the information that is still not on clinicaltrials.gov, but more or less we're using this information. The main difference comes with the fact that we are trying to present information not with the medical language that you can see on clinicaltrials.gov, but in a language that is more common to all of us. Something that I was really surprised when I had to look for a clinical trial for closed ones for my sister as well was that once again, the information on clinicaltrials.gov is just the pure documentation that sponsors of clinical trials that have to submit to the regulatory bodies. So you don't really see the most important details, the most important on a patient perspective. So that's the first difference. The second difference is that by using the FindMeCure platform, and I don't want to be like I don't want to sound platforms like FindMeCure, you can go on and really try and browse. But what we are trying to achieve is to help every single patient out there when he needs a clinical trial support. Because I already told you the third challenge was the fact that even if you find information, even if you understand information, the third problem is to actually get in contact with the clinical trial staff. And this is the main difference between clinicaltrials.gov and platforms like ours. And especially with ours, we work closely with patient organizations, but also closely with hospitals so that we can have this direct communication with them and help you get a contact and information from them as quickly as possible. So this is one of the main difference. And just to go on with I hope that this answers your question. So Christine Williams, we covered that. Francis Hennigan, clinical trials were successfully carried out in European country. Yes, that's true. Patients have now been refused the medication and 2 people have died recently as a result. Your thoughts, please. Francis, that's true. Yes, I completely agree that it's not a perfect system. It really depends on the country where you are. And the thing is that clinical trials is pretty much international regulated. And at the same time, there are local requirements and regulations as well. So, for example, in some countries like the Latin American countries, it's almost by law that clinical trials give you this expanded access, which means that you have access to the treatment even after the clinical trial. In Europe and in the States, this is not really the case, and we have to fight for this to happen. And I think that we will get there, but really now the focus on the whole industry is how to really shorten these timelines for these clinical trials, because now 9 out of 10 clinical trials fail, and one of the main reasons for this failure is not the scientific part, but the fact that they can't find patients that fit their clinical trials quickly enough, and they really struggle. At the same time, there are so many patients out there struggling finding information on clinical trials. So within FindMeCure, we try to tackle the problems one by one, and the expanded access will be something that we're really passionate about. We actually, one of our colleagues is working on actually just finalized a PhD on this topic. And if you're more interested on that, just send me an email on Maya. I'll show you now. Here are my contact details, maya@findmecure.com, and happy to share more information about that. Any other questions, guys? I really try to cover different topics, and as I said, it's a broad area. It would be great if we can have a separate webinar with more case studies so that you can learn from what's happening with other patients, their struggles, but also their benefits. Something that I want to share with you is that in the end, the statistics say that only 5% of people, in general I speak, know about clinical trials. But at the same time, 85% of people that have participated in clinical trials would like to do that again. They're happy with the clinical trials and they will do it again. Another question that I see here, Olivia. Hi Maya, the patient's right defined by the EMA, or are they set out by the people conducting the trials? So that's a very good question, Olivia. At the very beginning, I said that after the World War II, many countries came together, which became something like really international. Nowadays, they're almost all countries. North Korea is not on the list, but almost all countries have the same standards and regulations. And these rights, these patients that I described, are on international level. So if you signed off on informed consent, for example, you have the right to say, I quit at every single point, and this is internationally defined. You also have to have a separate, I'm not sure whether it's defined medical insurance, but like a separate insurance on top of your of the one that you have. And this is also an international standard. And it's not defined by the sponsor, but the regulatory authorities, meaning the European Medical Agency, Food and Drug Authority in the States, etc. Christine Williams, are you on Twitter? Yes, we are on Twitter. Yes, we are on Facebook. It's it's like my mistake. I didn't add them on my final slide. But if you go on Facebook, FindMeCure, or on Twitter, we have a lot of information about clinical trials. And if you need support, we also have online support on our platform. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome. And actually, I see here that Francis said that a follow-up webinar would be great. My question to you is, what are the topics that you would like to learn more about? And are these topics for yourself, for a closed one, or for example, for patients that you cover within your communities? Because that changes a lot of the perspectives, and I can speak a lot about different perspectives. Within FindMeCure, we partner with a lot of organizations, including the International Alliance of Patient Organizations, and our main goal is to educate people about their rights and about the benefits and risks in clinical research. So Christine here says, it would be valuable to understand how to access analysis of results of clinical trials that have been completed. Great idea. Actually, we have all of the completed clinical trials on our platform as well. And probably as a next webinar, and I will write this down here, we can have a session on the completed clinical trials and why this is important and how you can find out more about starting clinical trials, at what stage you should expect that the clinical trial that has been completed will have like a follow-on phase, for example, and things like that. Yes, so patients in Ireland, Christine is representing the patients in Ireland. This is really great, and happy to speak even more on a regional level. I have like a lot of friends there, so really happy to have even like a customized webinar on that. Any other questions, guys? Really, or comments? Something that you didn't like or you would disagree, for example. Francis asks about perspective of a large group in chronic pain. Actually, we just started working with the American Chronic Pain Association, and we will be working on series of materials. You can understand like videos, infographics, webinars, everything possible, so that we can have a better focus on an understanding of the clinical research in these areas. Usually, the type of clinical trials tackling chronic pain are the clinical trials that want to prove that a certain new treatment is better than something that is already existing, or let's say the existing ones are too, I mean, they handle a certain level of pain and not all of the pain, or at one point they stop working. So that's why companies are looking for new treatments to handle the pain in longer periods of time, or like larger pain or mid pain, for example. So that's a very interesting webinar that we can have on the clinical trials for chronic pain, if that would be interesting. Yeah, so as Victoria is reminding me, we are at the end of this webinar, and if you have any further thoughts or questions, even if not now, here are my contact details. Please come back to me with your comments, like suggestions, or how we can better improve our webinars. We would love to do that down the road. Like even specific topics would be great. In the end of the day, as I said, is really to help people, to help each other, because all of us, we are patients in the end of the day. We also believe, like the International Alliance of Patient Organizations, their motto was knowledge is power. That's also our drive to share more information that people can understand, because in the end of the day, this is the only way for a person to make an informed decision, especially in an area so important about your health and your life. So we'll keep working on that. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar, and happy to see you again, of course, with your colleagues and friends and families. And I will use my opportunity now to also wish you happy holidays. Stay healthy, close to your loved ones, be positive, and really enjoy some really wonderful holidays. Thank you so much. Bye from me.